Y'all, this might be the unluckiest manhwa protagonist in the history of manhwas. He has no family, no home, and worst of all, he awakened as an F-rank hunter, the bottom 1%. His bad luck stems from his previous life, where he lived as a deranged man who sought after chaos and destruction. He terrorized many and earned the title Blood Demon. Through his actions, he built up karma, and even though he reincarnated, that karma followed him. And now, to atone for his sins, he has to complete divine trials. But before we get into that, let's start from the beginning. Inside a daycare waiting room, the television suddenly flashed, drawing the attention of our young protagonist, Kang-san. The news anchor relayed the news. He says due to the sudden outbreak phenomenon, unarmed civilians are being slaughtered. Authorities confirmed 6 dead, but that number is expected to rise. The parents who were on their way to pick up their kids from the daycare fell victim to the outbreak phenomenon. Kang's parents were among the many who died that day, and after losing everything, his misfortune didn't stop. His relatives, the ones who were supposed to look after him in place of his parents, took this opportunity to steal his parents' property, leaving him on the streets to fend for himself. But his parents instilled in him the value of hard work, so he pushed through, juggling his studies and a part-time job. He was talented and smart, but Kang believed he had been cursed. When he was about to take an important exam, his appendix suddenly burst, causing him to fail. Due to the circumstances, he received another attempt, but on the day he was supposed to take the exam, the bus he took got into an accident. Luckily, he walked away with his life, but he once again couldn't take the exam. As if that wasn't enough, another time he was late because someone left their damn bike in front of his door, locking him in his small apartment. Similar incidents kept happening, and he was branded as a failure. Eventually, he pinned his hopes on awakening. Awakening is the starting point of becoming a hunter, and usually, those who are chosen by gods show innate talent from birth. However, there are cases where a person awakens their innate talent at the age of 20 and still becomes a well-respected hunter. Going forward, Kang never neglected his training. He trained his body and mind, but on the day of the awakening test, his efforts proved to be in vain. He awakened as an F-rank hunter, and while looking through the results of the awakening test, the worker says Kang awakened without any special skill. It's safe to assume that he is in the bottom 1% of hunters. Kang's mental state collapsed, and 5 years passed quickly. The scene shifts to a high-stakes battle. A wolf-like monster, Knoll, pulls back its weapon and swings with full force. A meat shield lifted his shield, blocking the attack, but the force of the strike broke his left arm. He let out a cry, drawing the attention of the 25-year-old Kang, who was occupied by another monster. Kang pinned the monster's hands on the ground, and then, with all the strength he could muster, he kicked the monster's jaw. Afterward, he turned to the mage and asked him to cast the spell a little faster. Annoyed, the mage says he's trying as he struggles to get his spell under control. Kang shifted his gaze forward and gritted his teeth. He didn't know why he decided to join this ridiculous raid team made up of a mage and a tanker. Their current situation isn't looking great. One of the tanker's arms is completely broken, and he isn't strong enough to buy time for the mage to finish casting his spell. He says the monster they are facing isn't particularly strong, but facing 2 at the same time as an F-rank is a tough fight. As he braced himself for the worst, the mage announced that the spell was done. He asks Kang and the other tanker to move, and with confidence, he says he will sweep the gnolls away with his brilliant attack. The flaming mana the mage was struggling to control earlier took the shape of a bow and arrow. The mage pulled back the string, and he fired the arrow. However, his aim was off, and the fire arrow landed just in front of the monsters. Frustrated, Kang turned to the mage. "You idiot," he shouted. "Why did you aim at the ground?" The mage didn't respond, and as he contemplated why his attack missed, their attention was drawn by the sound of the second tanker's sword hitting the ground. The tanker was pinned by one of the monsters, and he called out for help. Kang started fighting the other monsters, but as he fought, he noticed the mage stepping through a portal. The mage changed into his regular clothes when Kang called, asking why he opened the exit portal. The mage apologizes. He says, "At this rate, they are all going to die. And although he feels bad, it's only right that the most useful one in the party survives." He knows that they don't want to die either, but that is their job as a meat shield. Kang gritted his teeth in frustration. Meat shield is a nickname he had grown accustomed to. Even though the official name for F-ranks without abilities is tankers, other hunters started calling them meat shields because they were used as bait for monsters. After humans started awakening, meat shields became the lowest class in society. It's to the point that no one would bat an eye if they died during a raid. If he risked his life to save another meat shield, then all his efforts to survive would end in a meaningless death. He dropped his weapon and sprinted toward the portal. He ran as fast as he possibly could, his heart racing. The portal started to close, but it seemed like he could make it when suddenly a pillar appeared in front of him, blocking the portal. A voice echoed, "You have been chosen by Asmun, the god of trials and hardship." Confused, Kang looked up and noticed a beautiful woman in white clothing sitting on the pillar. Kang asks her if she is insane, and he demands that she open the portal. The woman stood and took a deep breath in, then shouted, "From now on, you have to endure this trial. This is the only way to erase the karma of your past life." Kang asks what she is talking about, and she suddenly drops down from the pillar, sending a shockwave mixed with debris flying through the dungeon. Then, with a smile, she asks Kang to make a choice. Our attention is then drawn to the second tanker, who was struggling underneath a knoll. He thought to himself, wondering where his life took a turn for the worst. Kim Chun-shik turned 30 this year, and his upbringing was similar to what is depicted in movies. He had an abusive father and a mother who abandoned him. One day his father got into an accident and died, leaving him alone with his grandmother. After his father's death, he was able to enjoy a normal upbringing, but one day his grandma collapsed, and after rushing her to the hospital, he was told that he needed at least 300 million won for his grandma's treatment. The only way he knew to make that sum of money was by becoming a hunter. At the age of 20, he discovered through an aptitude test that he had no talent, but he had no choice but to risk his life in raids. 6 months after becoming a hunter, he found himself in this situation, pinned underneath a knoll. He regretted letting his greed cloud his judgment and foolishly following the mage. The knoll pressed its massive paws on his chest, crushing his ribs. Kim screamed in agony, and as his consciousness began to fade, all he could think about was his grandma. His eyes welled with tears, and everything turned dark as he struggled to breathe. But suddenly the monster raised its giant paws and charged at Kang, stabbing him through the stomach. The beautiful woman leaned over with a beautiful smile and touched the monster's claws, which were drenched in Kang's blood, explaining to Kang that he was the blood demon in his previous life and the reason why he had had to endure so much hardship. As she touched the monster's claws, it disappeared, and Kang's wounds regenerated. Once again, Kang asks what she is talking about, and she repeats, "You were the blood demon in your previous life." Kang looked at her up and down with a confused expression, struggling to understand what she was going on about. Noticing his expression, the lady opens her arms and says, Kang can choose not to believe her, but unless he resolves his karma, his misfortunes will continue. However, she declared that if he resolves his karma through the divine trials, then he will be rewarded for his hardships. She urged that the only way he can live the life he wants is by resolving his karma through the divine trial. Suddenly, she grabbed Kang's head and twisted it towards the second tanker, exclaiming, "It's time for your first trial." She tells him to help the F-rank hunter, Kim Chun-shik. Kang's eyes widened with shock. "Are you insane?" He faced her and asks if she wanted him to die. The lady interrupted his rant with a smile and showed him the reward for completing this trial. Without a moment's hesitation, Kang picked up his sword and sprinted towards Kim. The other gnolls charged, and Kang reached into his pockets and pulled out a sharpness potion. He used the potion on his sword and picked up a shield as he charged. One of the gnolls swung at Kang with full force. He blocked the attack, but the force of the swing sent him to his knees. He deflected the gnoll's club into the ground and ran towards the tanker. Another gnoll swung its club, and Kang leaned backward and slid underneath it. As he slid, Kang stabbed the gnoll, tearing open its stomach. Then he jumped on the gnoll and stabbed it in the chest. The gnoll thrashed around, and Kang held on to his blade, begging the gnoll to die. In desperation, the gnoll clawed away at Kang, slashing his arm. A moment later, the gnoll let out a final cry and collapsed to the ground. With this, Kang had finished off one of the gnolls, although it wasn't without a cost. As blood dripped from his arm, he stood gasping for air. Before he could catch his breath, another gnoll crept up behind him and lunged at his injured arm. He pulled his arm away and prepared to fight, but he quickly realized that he left his sword impaled in the other gnoll. Just then the words of that woman echoed in his head. Trials are always set at a level that he must risk his life. Desperate, he turned to the knoll and pulled out a small pocket knife. He jumped at the knoll, saying, "Let's do this, you bastard." The knoll clawed away at him, and he stabbed it repeatedly. A moment later the knoll collapsed, and Kang stood hunched over, catching his breath. Then he stood and sprinted towards the first knoll he killed, and after grabbing his sword he threw it at the final knoll, with all the strength he could muster. The sword impaled the final knoll in the head, and a moment later it collapsed. Kang followed suit, and as he lost consciousness, he received a message from the system congratulating him on completing his first trial. A few hours later, we see someone slapping Kang and shouting for him to wake up. He opened his eyes, seeing the lady from earlier with her fist pulled back. He sat up quickly, and she handed him a piece of paper saying, "This is your promised reward." Kang grabbed the paper and asks what he is supposed to do with it. Annoyed, she explained that the piece of paper contained details about his reward. As Kang looked through his status window, she observed him quietly, and she remarked that it seemed the world had become a better place. However, she expresses that that was just the first trial, and Kang won't be able to pass the next test so easily. She waved goodbye and disappeared. Kang then turned his attention to his status window. His eyes widened in disbelief as he read through his rewards. His first reward was the 2-star skill Aura of Recovery. It heals the wounds of the user or ally. Initial healing is 20%, but increases based on holy power. Next, he received the 2-star growth type skill, Will of the Guardian, a skill that increases defense and stamina regeneration by 1% for every enemy in the vicinity. If his stamina drops below 10%, the effects of the skill are doubled, and whenever divine power reaches 5 stars, Will of the Guardian will evolve. Kang narrates that most hunters only possess a 1-star skill, the most common being Enhanced Blade. Only D-rank hunters, or higher, possess 2-star skills, and from 3-star skills and onwards, you just have to be extremely lucky. Kang couldn't contain himself. He rolled around on the ground rejoicing. He says after all the shit he's been through, his luck is finally taking a turn. His celebrations were cut short. He remembered that woman telling him he hadn't passed all the trials yet before disappearing. Just then, the system reminds him that he hasn't safely escaped the dungeon with Kim Chunchik. Kang quickly ran over, and as he applied pressure on Kim's wounds, he apologized for losing focus. He continued applying pressure to his wounds, but Kim was losing too much blood. He suddenly remembered the Aura of Recovery skill. He activated the skill, remarking that this must be why he received it as a reward. He used the skill on Kim, healing his wounds and scars. The scene shifts to 3 days later, at the Hunter's Management Bureau, and we see the mage as he is about to enter an interrogation room. He complained about being forced to come in, and after entering the room, he turned to the authorities, a female officer and a male officer, and asks why they called him. The authorities stood, and Sungmin notices a man sitting in the back, couldn't make out his face. The authorities approached, expressing a need for the mage, Sungmin, to answer a few questions about the raid a few days ago. Sungmin got a good look at the person in the back. He recognized this person immediately and asks how he made it out of the gate alive. The authorities asked him to take a seat. Sungmin went silent, and he walked backward towards the door. He opened the door and sprinted for the exit, however he was quickly pinned to the ground and restrained. The female officer accused him of abandoning his comrades during an F-rank raid. She reminded him that intentionally leading your comrades to their deaths is a serious crime. Sungmin asks if they have any proof that he abandoned his comrades on purpose. He says he only retreated because the fight was unwinnable. The female officer opened a system panel with a recording from the raid being played. The recording showed 2 F-rank tankers and a mage taking on 4 gnolls, but the moment his spell missed, Sungmin ran away. With this recording as evidence, the court should see his intent, and he will be sentenced to the maximum time for his crimes. Sungmin was placed under arrest, and as he was taken away, he cried out, "I swear I only retreated because it was an unwinnable fight." The female officer approached Kang and thanked him for providing the evidence. She says the Hunter's Management Bureau receives many reports of intentional murders during raids, but proving them is extremely difficult. Kang expresses that he's seen the articles online, which is why he always carries a recording device with him. If someone decides to kill an F-rank during a raid, there's no way for the F-rank to fight back. That's why F-ranks are urged to run background checks on their teammates beforehand. The moment Sungmin's fire arrow missed, Kang noticed that he completely lost his composure and chose to abandon his comrades. Worst of all, he likely felt no guilt because they were meat shields. Kang clenched his fist, feeling proud of his accomplishments. The female officer points out that the footage shows that Kang is far stronger than your average F-rank tanker, and she asks why he chooses to work as a tanker. If he enlists in the army, he will be given specialized weapons for fighting monsters, and his life will be much easier. Kang says firearms won't work on monsters with hardened exteriors, and although the world is a dangerous place, and he has had his share of misfortunes, he won't leave things to chance. Feeling proud, he says he will grow stronger as a hunter no matter what. Sometime later, Kang exited the building, and as he stretched, he hoped that Sungmin would get the maximum sentence. Out of nowhere, a shabby-looking man approached him asking if he was Kang. Kang was taken aback. He confirmed his identity, and the man suddenly dropped to the ground and says, "I greet my savior." A few days ago, inside a hospital, Kim suddenly sprung up in his bed, screaming for help. He looked around, and suddenly, the memory from the raid came flooding in. At some point, during the raid, he lost consciousness, and he concluded that the other tanker, Kang, must have saved him after the mage ran away. He started to question how an F-ranker was able to take down 4 gnolls when a voice called his name, interrupting his thinking. Kim recognized the voice and sprung out of bed and ran towards his grandma. His grandma berates him for taking dangerous jobs, and she asks if he has a death wish. Kim asks her not to be mad, and as tears stream down his face, he points out that he survived. His grandma wiped his tears and asks if he was trying to die in her stead. She made him promise not to do something like that ever again. The scene shifts to the present, and we see Kang trying to get Kim to stop embarrassing him in front of the Huz. He insists he's not some great hero, however. This doesn't deter Kim, and he continues looking at Kang with admiration in his eyes. Everyone was giving them strange looks, and Kang wasn't sure how to handle this situation. He could resolve this if he told Kim that he only saved him because of the trial. However, his conscience wouldn't let him. Luckily, he was certain that if he left quickly, they wouldn't be seeing each other again, so he told Kim that he would be on his way. Kim called out for him to wait and asks if there's anything he can do to repay his kindness. Kang says it's fine, and suddenly he receives the second divine trial. Kim's grandmother is suffering from a rare disease, and he cannot afford the surgery to cure her. The system asks him to donate 150 million won to cover the cost of the surgery. Kang stared at the trial interface and gritted his teeth. Sometime later, in an alleyway, Kang read through the trial conditions again. The reward for completing this trial was +2 in strength, agility, holy power, and a 1-star skill. Kang stared at his savings account. He had painstakingly saved 168 million won through countless grueling jobs. This was his entire fortune, and he found it difficult to part ways with the money he had worked so hard for. As he contemplated what to do, he remembered that strange woman telling him that he would be able to live his desired life if he cleansed the karma from his previous life. As she explained, this was a path he couldn't walk away from, as all previously granted rewards would be revoked, and he would be burdened with an even greater load to carry. Frustrated, he clenched his fist and says he should have given it more thought before accepting the Apostle's path. He read through the rewards once more, 6 stat points and 1-star skill. No additional rewards were mentioned, so he concluded that that must be all. But more important than the rewards, if he doesn't complete this trial, he will lose the rewards from the previous trial and won't be able to attempt the 3rd trial. The higher the rank of the hunter, the greater his earning potential. If he can grow beyond F rank, Kang is certain that he can easily recuperate 150 million won. He decided that trading 150 million won for a skill wasn't a bad trade. He dialed a number on his phone and asks to be connected to the administrative office. With this, he completed the trial and received his promised rewards. A few days later, at the hunter's promotional exam, a worker called for applicants, number 31 to 40. The applicants were brought into another room and were addressed by a mediator who announced the start of the basic aptitude test. He explained that when they are called, the applicants will be transported to their virtual reality training room. He says the goal of the test is to complete the assigned mission based on roles. The mission has been adjusted to match the required level, so failure means that the applicant isn't qualified for a promotion. After the explanation, the mediator called for applicant number 38, Kang. Kang applied for the tanker role, and he was given the mission to hold back 4 gnolls and protect his allies for 5 minutes. Kang approached the portal to his personal virtual reality training room. As he steps through, the mediator says a sword and shield would be provided as his default weapon, and his stats would be locked at 30. From the observation room, the mediator, along with a couple of workers, wished Kang good luck. Inside the training room, Kang immediately drew the attention of the gnolls. He narrated that thanks to giving away 150 million won, his combat stats increased by 2 points. He went through hell just to raise his stats out of the low teens, but now he can boast that he has a stat at 30. Furthermore, he obtained one of the fundamental skills for a tanker, Guardian Shield. He was excited to test out his newly acquired rewards, and suddenly the gnolls charged. One of the gnolls lunged, and Kang deflected the attack. The second gnoll swung its giant paws. Kang elegantly stepped back, evading the attack, and then he sidestepped and kneed the second gnoll in the side. The second gnoll crashed into the first, and Kang immediately shifted his attention to the other gnolls. The third gnoll attacked with its giant claws. Kang blocked the attack, but the weight of the gnoll's paws brought him to his knees. He narrates that the test increased his overall stat to 30, which is why his reaction time felt faster, and the reason he was so calm. The scene shifts to the observation room, where the mediators watch in silence. A pink-haired woman praised Kang for his situational awareness. She says, among all the applicants so far, he seems to be the most capable. The scene shifts back to the battle, and as Kang fights off the 4th gnoll, the 3rd one sneaks past and heads for his makeshift allies. The pink-haired lady grew disappointed, as it seemed Kang was about to fail. The purpose of this test is to evaluate how well the applicants can fulfill their role, but it seems like Kang has forgotten his allies behind him and has chosen to show off his skills. As the gnoll neared his allies, Kang activated the Guardian Shield skill, drawing the aggro of the 3rd gnoll. The 3rd gnoll attacked from behind, and Kang easily blocked the attack. The mediators were stunned. Guardian skills have different functions depending on the user's role, and for tankers, it draws the enemy's aggro. Kang ducked, narrating that in the process of cleansing his karma, it seems the gods are forcing him to embrace true selflessness. The role of a tanker is to stand at the front lines and shield their allies. When things go wrong, tankers are usually the first to die, but due to the high risk, there is a high demand for tankers. If he can prove his worth as a tanker, then he can earn enough money to be called a walking corporation. As he rolled out of the 3rd gnoll's attack, he was met with a paw headed for his face. Kang dodges the attack, and with a smile, he says the high-risk, high-reward play of a tanker suits him perfectly. As the gnolls encircled him, he continued on, saying that fights like these are more his style. He got ready to attack, but suddenly the gnolls disappeared, and it was announced that his test was over. Kang stood and approached the exit. Right now, his #1 priority is getting promoted. He knows that at his current rank, he can't participate in higher-tier raids, and to continue his growth, he needs to shake off the meat shield label. He stepped through the exit, with everyone's eyes fixed on the results display. Kang turned around, seeing he received S+, a perfect score. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this recap, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell.